All right. So we're debating the virgin birth, and it's my position that it's possible that the virgin birth isn't accurate. I think that Matthew took liberty in trying to correlate Jesus's ministry with Old Testament prophecies, and I think that he made a few mistakes and that he was incorrect when he said that Emmanuel from Isaiah 7 is Jesus. I think that person, Emmanuel from Isaiah 7, was born 700 years before Jesus, and that's not it's not a future prophecy about Mary and Jesus. And the
Kind of like you, who doesn't think most of the Bible is even supposed to be there.
yeah, that doesn't make me wicked. It actually makes me, righteous.
The point Dirty's making is that the Bible has lies in it.
No,
And-
but the point is
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
We can go to other manuscripts to show the deity of Christ. So it's not like it's all relying on that, which I think we're in
So
agreement.
if
with
there's
that.
differences in the manuscript, that's kind of like straining at the gnat and then gulping down the camel of Paul. The entire 13 books of Paul are full of lies, and then you're straining at the gnat. You're saying, well, this manuscript has one error here, and and we have a different translation for this. You guys are straining at the gnat.
It's
Those
worth
are
looking at.
issues.
No, you're just accusing the whole writer of the majority of the New Testament. I mean, to be honest,
Right.
I mean, come on.
Yes, and frankly,
you're straining at the gnat and gulping down the camel. You're gulping
you
Paul right down.
You are being exceedingly dumb, and I don't know how else to say it, because you can't translate Greek 1-to-1, for example, into English. There are multiple ways to translate certain words, which does not invalidate the process.
Yeah, I'm okay with having a few translation errors. That's fine. But when we're talking about,
it is, you're talking about inspiration as in like Michael Jordan inspired me to play basketball. That is actually not the proper use of the word in its original context. The word inspiration is from the Latin inspiratus, which comes from, it's actually a translation of the Greek theanustos, which literally means God breathed. So that's where the word inspired actually comes from.
Yeah, where is the word inspired located in the Bible?
Well, technically nowhere, because it's not.
Well,
written
it is
Latin.
in Paul.
But hang on.
Paul said it's inspired. It's God breathed.
Well, that's what I mean, right? So the point that I'm making is, if it is true that the Bible is inspired by God, the word inspired is a Latin word that comes from the Greek theanustos. And if it is true then that the Bible is inspired or God breathed in its original language, then that brings up the question I was asking earlier. Now, is it possible for the inspired words of God written in their original autographs or translated as intended, would be another way you could put it, is it possible for that to be corrupted? And I would say the answer is no, because otherwise
if the Bible is inspired, then yeah, you're right about everything you said. But if it's, Paul is the only one who said it's inspired. Jesus said it's not.
Let Charles go next here. He was waiting.
Do you believe that Peter's words are inspired?
Yes.
Okay, well, Peter, what does Peter say about Paul?
Are you talking about 2 Peter 3:16?
Yes. Yeah.
That's a warning against Paul's letters, in my view.
Oh, but the warning is unlearned and untrained people twisted to their own destruction.
That's what they do with Paul's letters.
If you're trained and you learn, then you'll understand Paul. But I guess you're neither.
Well, Charlie, you have to realize that unfortunately Dirty chokes on English.
We've been over this.
Okay, so
we've been over this.
All right, so what about the book of Luke? Do you believe the book of Luke?
Yeah, I think Luke is a pretty good, mostly historically accurate. Yeah.
Let Charles pursue this.
Maybe there's a few mistakes. Maybe Luke didn't get everything.
What is your criteria for determining what's inspired or not? If it sounds like Paul,
nothing is inspired.
He's the prophet. He's the prophet.
Words in the Bible are inspired the way you guys define inspiration.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Well, because Jesus
What is
said
your
that.
criteria?
He's the prophet.
How can you quote Jesus whenever you're saying that the sources that you're quoting are not inspired? That's not Jesus.
Yeah, I love that.
It
Charles.
doesn't have
Thank
to
you,
be
Charles.
inspired to be true.
Hold on.
How do you
Charles
know it's
said
true?
exactly the right question.
How do you know it's
What is
true?
your criteria?
Okay,
That's what we
two of
want
you
to
are
know.
talking.
What is your criteria?
What is your criteria? Yeah.
So, like I said before, it doesn't have to be inspired to be true. Like 1 + 1 is 2. That doesn't need to be inspired. How do you know that's true? I can test it. I can test to see whether it's true.
How can you test that the words of Jesus in the Bible are true?
That's a good question. I mean, you're arguing from an atheist perspective, which is weird.
No,
you're asking
I'm arguing.
atheist
I'm
questions.
arguing.
How do you know that anything Jesus says is true? No, because you think it's inspired. Oh, and so since I don't think it's inspired, it can't be true either.
I'm asking you
Hey,
your
Dirty,
criteria.
that's an atheist argument.
I'm asking
We
you
want to know your criteria, sir.
Well, Jesus's criteria was, first of all, to take the word of 2 or 3 witnesses.
How do you know that statement is true?
Because Jesus said it.
How do you know Jesus said it?
Because I've got 2 or 3 witnesses that say he said it.
Who are your 2 or 3 witnesses?
Mark, Luke, and Matthew.
How do you know that they actually said it?
Well, hang on though. That's
see, you're going down this atheist line of questioning. Because how do you know, layman seminary? How do you know what Jesus said? You don't know
what your criteria.
I have the same Bible as you.
There has to be a brief point of order here, because that reasoning is inherently circular. Because you said, how do we know? Because it's verified by 2 or 3 witnesses. Well, how do you know that the 2 or 3 witnesses thing is actually said by Jesus? Because that's verified by 2 or 3 witnesses. Well, that's what you're trying to establish.
Yeah, and how do you know that
I agree that there's a certain
how do you know that the Old Testament passage about 2 or 3 witnesses is true?
Look, I agree that there's a certain amount of faith, when it comes to the Bible, and I'm
what do you
reading
mean by faith?
The words that I read in the Bible, if I believe them, there's a certain amount of faith there. I don't know.
What do you mean by faith?
I wasn't there. I didn't see Jesus. So no, I can't say what Jesus said. All I have are the witness statements. And then I have to look at all 3 witness statements and the things that let me talk. Let me finish, Ryan. Let me finish. I'm not done. So, like in a court case, if you've got 2 or 3 witness statements, you look at all 3 witness statements and you look at the things that line up. And if they contradict each other, you kind of throw that out.
Okay,
but
so have you studied the Bible like a lawyer?
I'm not finished, layman's. So after you look at the 3 witness statements, you can decide for yourself what things line up in all 3 witness statements. And sometimes
so you're God. You're God. That's basically.
I'm okay with that answer. I'm okay with that answer.
If he wants to go that route, but okay,
at the end of the day, Dirty, you still can't escape the tremendous problem into which you've backed yourself, which is that you are basically equating yourself to God in determining what belongs in the Bible.
No, that's not true.
Or you're making yourself.
I'm just using common sense, and you guys are throwing away common sense and saying, "Oh, it's all inspired."
I'm just going to assert something. I'm asserting it, and it has to be so because I say so, and I don't care to hear otherwise.
Has he done the rigorous study? And if so, where are the books?
No.
Yeah, but do you see, Layman's, can I ask Layman's a question? Like this line of questioning you're giving me can all apply back to you. You don't know what Jesus said.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And that's why I'm a presuppositionalist.
What's that mean?
That means there's certain things that
you
I have to presuppose
that it's inspired, right?
No, that I presuppose.
There's zero logic in that.
Hey, the Pharisees said the same thing when they crucified Jesus, that these people were not knowledgeable in the scriptures.
We point back to the fact, not because we presuppose something dirty, but we point back to the fact that we have manuscripts that overall, to the 99.9% degree, concur with each other. That we have far better documentation for the New Testament than we have for Ovid, or that we have for Homer, that we have for the Iliad and Odyssey, etc.
I agree with that.
So you are dismissing evidence which is inconvenient to your ridiculous views.
What's
30.
that evidence?
I just believe the Bible, man.
I know that's wrong,
He
Jamie.
just gave you some support, but Dirty, this is a serious question. How can you trust translators when they also translated Paul's words?
The reason I can trust translators is because there's a multitude of them, and they all have access to the
But the
same
multitude
manuscript.
decided to translate Paul's letters.
So
narrow is the way, but straight.
So
is
it's
the
a
path.
conspiracy. They've all decided.
no,
They've
it's not
all
a
decided
conspiracy.
to deceive everybody with Paul, right?
No. So you're straining at the gnat and gulping down the camel.
How do you know? What does that statement even mean?
Yes.
It means that you're straining at these translation errors. Like one little letter is off, and you're like, let's strain at
It's
that
funny
for a while.
you mentioned that about
and
one.
We'll swallow down the whole 13 books of
funny.
Paul's lives.
It's funny you mentioned one little letter, because you know the difference between a camel and a gnat, and I think it's in the Hebrew is one letter, and so it's a pun.
Oh, okay.
I've heard that, yeah.
Last time I checked.
Right. So it actually makes more sense.
Well, Layman is actually
you guys
correct.
are straining at one little letter, whereas the whole entire book of Revelation is
No,
a lie.
it's
you guys
you.
are swallowing it.
Wait, pause. Okay, let Charles get a word out. Then whoever was blabbing over him can speak.
It's you that is rejecting the overall Bible because you're choking over Paul.
I'm not choking. Ace
Are you
Theo,
smoking Paul Malls?
Are you familiar with Ace Theo? He actually interprets Paul correctly. He knows what Paul is trying to say.
Well, you're appealing to somebody else. What's your point?
Yes, you're now shifting the topic, and ironically, instead telling us that we're rejecting evidence, you're actually making an appeal to authority of a man.
Why are you appealing to Ace Thulu?
Oh, I'm not appealing to him. I'm not making some sort of argument or anything.
You
I
said
was just
he
trying to
had the
clear up
correct
my position
interpretation.
so that layman's seminary would know, because he said, "Oh, you're misinterpreting Paul or whatever," and so I
You
wanted him
are.
to know.
You're
like,
rejecting Paul. It's
right.
because
I'm rejecting Paul, but I have the same view.
Why are
of
you
Paul's
rejecting Paul?
I have the same interpretation of Paul's doctrine as Ace Theo. And that's why I was just pointing him out, so that it would be an easy reference, so that you'd kind of know what my view on Paul.
And I'm destroying your chain of argumentation, which you're not getting.
I was talking to layman's
So what
seminary,
are your objections to Paul? What is so wrong with Paul's theology?
Well, there's a lot wrong with it, in my opinion.
We'll go with the main ones.
The main one would be that, his gospel is the opposite of Jesus's gospel.
That's an assertion. All right, keep going.
Jesus's gospel is to do works. Good works are going to save you, and then Paul's gospel is
That's
great.
an assertion. Based on what passage?
Every passage, like when Jesus
is it
said,
possible you're misunderstanding what Jesus was saying?
It's absolutely not.
Yeah, I'm a works-based heretic, and I would say it that
Jesus.
Way.
It's almost impossible to misunderstand.
So are you saying your reason for rejecting Paul is because you think that Paul is opposed to Jesus?
Yes.
Okay, well then let's just focus on studying Jesus's words.
Okay. So Jesus said, I'll quote Jesus. Jesus said that the reason these guys are going to heaven is because they fed or clothed or gave something to drink his brethren, and so that's works. What they did got them into heaven.
What verse? You talking about Matthew 25?
Matthew 25.
Right.
That passage is about service.
What do you mean?
It's not about salvation. It's about service.
No, it's about salvation.
So it's about service.
Yeah,
show me that it's
brings
about
salvation.
Service
it is about
brings
service.
Salvation.
Yes, Jesus said the reason they're going to heaven is because they did these good works.
So why did Jesus die on the cross?
Because wicked people killed him.
Okay, so you don't believe that Jesus needed to die?
No. Well, no.
Did Jesus die in place of you?
No, Jesus didn't die as a
okay,
human
so the
sacrifice.
reality is you deny the substitutionary atonement of Christ, right?
Yes.
Okay, you also deny that Jesus Christ is God, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you don't believe that the statements that Jesus says in the Gospels is correct either, right?
No, I do. Everything Jesus said is correct. We have a school And so we say, oh, that's the Deuteronomistic school. It's the other way around. It's like we have these sources, and they all seem to have a certain ideological theme, and so we say that's the Deuteronomistic school, and then we say, well, the P source.
So you're saying the Bible can't have multiple themes?
Well, no, it's that there's a polemic against certain, like the P and D are fighting against each other. They're
okay. So if they're fighting against each other, then are they in? Okay, you don't believe in inspiration,
right?
So you have conflict in. Okay, so this is really what's going on.
So I have to choose which one I believe in.
You're using dialectical reasoning behind all this. So what you're basically doing is you're pitting Paul against Jesus, and you're pitting these sources against them. And so because you assume this polemic against all the authors, and that somebody just, over the years tried to smooth out all these things, except they left gaps in it that you were able to determine, or the scholars were able to determine, right?
Jesus knew about it. He told us about it. He told us exactly which parts of the Torah are incorrect, such as eye for an eye. Jesus said, you heard of eye for an eye. Jesus said, you heard of eye for an eye, but I say,
okay, that's not what we're asking.
I'm not finished. Ryan, shut up, Ryan. I'm not finished here. I'm still talking.
Did you determine that?
Ryan, you're just trying to stop me from talking. I lost my train of thought, because you're interrupting me.
Your own medicine. How did you determine that?
No, Jesus said, okay, the parts of the Torah are a lie, are the eye for an eye. Jesus said, you heard of eye for an eye, but I said you need to turn the other cheek. And so Jesus is saying eye for an eye was never commanded by God. And we know eye for an eye was stolen from Hammurabi's code, and it was added into the Bible during the, they stole it from Hammurabi. They didn't invent, that wasn't from God.
All right. Well, first off,
okay, so